Welcome, fellow voyagers. I am thrilled to begin this journey with you, as today marks the start of a major new series on the Roman Republic. Together, we will trace its incredible journey from the tyranny of the last king to the power of the first emperor. If you love deep historical dives and finding sleep in the echoes of the ancient world, I invite you to settle in. Liking and subscribing goes a long way in helping me continue telling these stories. So now, let us travel back to the very edge of history to witness the bloody birth of the Roman Republic. Before we descend into the trenches of 509 BC, we must first address the silence of the archaeological record. When modern historians look back at this pivotal year, many see not a clear sequence of events, but a fog of mythology. Scholars today often dismiss the traditional narrative you're about to hear as largely fictitious. There is, quite simply, no concrete evidence for or against it. We have no contemporary documents from the 6th century BC. We have only the oral traditions written down by Livy and Dionysius centuries later. Many historians argue that the revolution was not a sudden coup, but a gradual decline, or perhaps an external conquest by Etruscan warlords. Some have even questioned the historical existence of the major players, suggesting that figures like Brutus and Lucretia are not flesh and blood people, but stock characters of Roman folklore, invented to explain the birth of the Republic. However, even if these events are fiction, they are a necessary fiction. To the Romans themselves, this was not a myth, it was their genesis. It defined their laws, their hatred of kings, and their obsession with virtue. To understand the soul of Rome, we must listen to the story exactly as they told it to themselves. And so we will set aside the skeptic's magnifying glass and step into the world as Livy saw it. A world where the fate of an empire hangs on the virtue of a single woman. To understand the violence of 509 BC, we must first understand the paradox of the man on the throne. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the Proud, was the 7th and final king of Rome. History remembers him as a villain, but he was also a visionary. He was a conqueror who expanded Rome's borders and a builder who turned a collection of hilltop villages into a true urban capital to rival the great Etruscan cities of Veii and Caere. But this grandeur came at a terrible price. Tarquin had seized the throne by force, murdering his predecessor and bypassing the Senate's approval. He ruled by fear, purging aristocratic rivals to seize their wealth. Yet his most dangerous mistake was not his cruelty to the rich, but his exploitation of the poor. To build his masterpiece, the colossal temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, and to dig the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer to drain the Forum, Tarquin conscripted the free citizens of Rome. For the Roman plebs, who saw themselves as honourable warriors, being forced to labour as stone cutters and ditch diggers was a humiliation reserved for slaves. By 509 BC, the treasury was empty, and the people were exhausted. The king needed gold to pay his debts and loot to pacify his angry subjects. He turned his eyes 20 miles south to the wealthy city of Ardea. He hoped for a quick sack. Instead, he got a stalemate. This is where our story begins, with an army of broke, resentful men sitting in the mud, led by a dynasty that had forgotten what it meant to be Roman. The story begins not in Rome, but in the humid, mosquito-humming lowlands of Latium. To the Romans, 509 BC is the 244th year since the she-wolf nursed the twins, Romulus and Remus. The sun is setting over the city of Ardea. The sky is a bruised purple, streaked with the dying embers of the day, casting long melancholic shadows across the earthworks of the Roman army. We are witnessing a siege, but this is not the dynamic machine-driven siege warfare of the later empire. There are no ballistae snapping in the dark, no massive stone onagers crushing walls. This is the archaic period, a time of bronze and muscle, where warfare is a slow, grinding contest of wills. The Roman army has encircled the city of the Rutuli. They have been here for months. The war has settled into the rhythm of the shovel and the basket, the ditch and the rampart. Imagine the sensory landscape of this encampment. It is a sprawling city of leather tents and wooden palisades. The air is thick with the specific smells of an ancient army at rest. The sharp tang of wood smoke from 1,000 cooking fires, the rich, heavy scent of roasting pork and boiling spelt porridge, the gritty staple of the soldier's diet, and the underlying notes of unwashed bodies and leather treated with tallow. But the most pervasive smell is resentment. The men sitting by these fires are not professional soldiers paid a wage. They are citizen farmers. They are the men of the classes, the heavy infantry defined by the Servian constitution. Men wealthy enough to afford their own bronze armour, yet treated by their king like state-owned labourers. They sit in the fading light, polishing their round aspis shields and sharpening their iron Xiphus swords, grumbling about the months spent digging tunnels in Rome's sewers, only to be marched here to dig ditches in Ardea's mud. They feel the monarchy has broken the social contract. The king is supposed to lead warriors, not drive task gangs. However, in the royal command tent, the atmosphere is entirely different. Here the air is perfumed with imported Greek wine and the heavy, sweet scent of expensive oil burning in fine ceramic lamps. The tent belongs to the gilded youth of Rome, the princes of the blood, Titus, Aruns, and the youngest, Sextus Tarquinius. With them is their cousin, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. These young men represent the cultural rot at the heart of the regime. They're Romans by blood, but they live like Etruscan aristocrats. They indulge in triphy, a softness and luxury that the austere Latin farmers despise. They recline on couches to eat, a foreign custom. They drink their wine unmixed, a sign of excess. They wear imported silks instead of rough wool. To the soldiers outside, these princes are aliens who treat the law as a tool for the weak and power as a toy for the strong. The siege offers no glory today, only dust and waiting. To pass the time they drink. As the night deepens, the conversation drifts, as it inevitably does among soldiers far from home, to women. It becomes a competitive bragging match, a way to assert dominance. Each prince boasts of his wife's beauty and wit, but mostly they speculate on their freedom. They laugh, imagining the princesses back in Rome. They know that in the royal palace, with the king away, the women are likely enjoying the same triphy as their husbands, hosting banquets, drinking with men, and enjoying the license of their station. The princes project their own lack of morals onto their wives, finding a cynical comfort in the idea that virtue is merely a lack of opportunity. But Collatinus, a man of a different temper, smiles quietly. He challenges them. He is a Tarquin, yes, but he adheres to the mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors. He asserts that words are idle when deeds can be proven. His wife, Lucretia, is not like theirs. She is, he claims, the very image of domestic virtue, a woman of the old stamp, before the foreign luxuries corrupted Roman simplicity. Why not see for ourselves, Collatinus asks, the wine making him bold. We are young, the horses are fresh. Let us ride to Rome and Galatia. Let us surprise them and see how they spend their hours when they believe no husband is watching. The idea takes hold. It appeals to the princes' restlessness and their arrogance. They want to prove Collatinus wrong. They want to expose his naivety and mock him for believing in a purity that they are convinced no longer exists. They call for their horses. They thunder out of the camp, leaving the siege behind, riding into the dark heart of Latium to test the soul of their city. The ride is a blur of darkness and hoofbeats. The princes leave the siege lines of Ardea, galloping north along the beaten tracks that wind through the Latium countryside. The roads are not yet the paved VI of the later Republic, those famous straight lines of stone that will one day shackle the world to Rome. These are dirt tracks, ancient drovers' paths churned into ruts by the war wagons, dusty in the summer and treacherous in the dark. The moon watches them as they thunder past sleeping farms and sacred groves, the wind tearing at their cloaks. They pass roadside shrines to the lares compitales, the guardian spirits of the crossroads. A pious Roman would stop to pay respects, but these young men ride past without a glance. They are the gilded youth, riding with the reckless immortality of those who believe the world was made for their pleasure. They're racing not just against each other, but against the boredom that haunts them. They reach Rome first. The city appears as a dark sprawl of hills and valleys, dominated by the silhouette of the unfinished Temple of Jupiter, looming massive on the Capitol. They make their way to the royal quarters on the Esquiline Hill, expecting to find their wives asleep, or perhaps weeping for their absent husbands. What they find instead confirms the prince's cynical worldview. The king's daughters-in-law are discovered in the midst of a luxurious banquet. The scene is an assault on the senses. The air is thick with the smoke of expensive incense and the sound of the lyre. But to the eyes of a conservative Roman, the scene is a scandal. The princesses are reclining on couches with their peers. We must pause to understand the gravity of this image. In the strict tradition of the Latins, the dining couch was the domain of men. Virtuous women sat upright in chairs at the foot of the couch. By reclining, these women are adopting the Etruscan custom, where women dined as equals with men, drinking wine and participating in the revelry. To the princes, this is normal. It is the modern, cosmopolitan way of the court. To history, however, it is a symptom of the cultural rift tearing Rome apart. These women are consuming the wealth of the state, while the men of the state die in the trenches of Ardea. They are living as queens in miniature, enjoying the license of their station. The princes laugh, satisfied. This is what wives do. This is the way of the world. Virtue is a myth. Pleasure is the reality. But Collatinus urges them on. He is not satisfied. To Collatia, he commands. The night is not yet over. Collatia lies a few miles to the east of Rome. It is a smaller town, less touched by the foreign affectations of the capital. They arrive late, the night deep and heavy. The town is quiet. They ride to the house of Collatinus. It is a traditional domus, an inward-looking fortress of the family. They dismount, the noise of their arrival startling the porter dozing at the gate. They push inside, past the vestibule and into the atrium, the central hall of the Roman home. The contrast is absolute. There is no banquet here, no music, no incense masking the smell of the night. The atrium is dimly lit by the flickering light of oil lamps. The only sound is the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the loom. In the centre of the room, amidst the shadows, sits Lucretia. She is not reclining. She is sitting upright on a high-backed chair, surrounded by her handmaidens. She is spinning wool. This image, the woman at the loom, is the central icon of Roman female virtue. It is the lanificium. In the ancient world, textile production was not a hobby. It was the primary economic contribution of the noble woman. Cloth was wealth. It was labour-intensive and vital for survival. By spinning wool late into the night, Lucretia is proving her industry. She is not consuming the household's resources like the princesses in Rome. She is creating them. Furthermore, she is working on a garment for her husband. While he fights for the king, she fights for the household. In the Roman mind, this connects her to the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. A woman who tends the hearth and the loom ensures that Vesta, the goddess of the home, remains favourable to the family. She speaks to her maids, her voice low in the quiet house, encouraging them as their weary fingers work the thread. She talks only of the war. How goes the siege, she asks. When will the war end? When will my husband return? The princes stand in the doorway, silenced by the tableau. They have ridden from a scene of decadence to a scene of duty. Collatinus steps forward, bursting with a pride that is more than just possessive. It is a vindication of his entire worldview. Lucretia, he calls. She looks up startled, her hands freezing on the wool. She rises to greet her husband, her face flushed with the surprise and joy of his arrival. She welcomes the princes graciously. Note her reaction. She does not hide, nor does she fawn. She offers them the hospitality due to kinsmen and royalty. She calls for food and wine, not for a revel, but for the necessary refreshment of travellers. The contest is decided. The daughters of the king were found at play. The wife of Collatinus was found at work. The prize of Virtus is awarded to Lucretia. The princes, sobered or perhaps shamed by the display, concede the victory. They drink the wine she offers, eat the bread she breaks, and in the early hours of the morning, they mount their horses to return to the camp at Ardea. But one man carries away more than the memory of a lost bet. Sextus Tarquinius, the king's youngest son, rides back in silence. He is a man accustomed to taking what he desires. To him, Lucretia's virtue is not something to be admired, it is something to be conquered. Historically, we must understand that his motivation is not merely lust, it is envy. Lucretia represents a moral authority that the Tarquins lack. Her purity makes his family look corrupt. Her industry makes his wife look lazy. To a tyrant, the existence of something uncorrupted is an insult. He desires to debauch her, to drag her down into the mud, so that he can prove that she is no better than the princesses in Rome. He plots as he rides. The siege will wait, the war will wait. He will return to Calatia alone. A few days later, the sun beats down on the dusty road to Calatia as a lone horseman approaches. It is Sextus Tarquinius. He rides with a single attendant, maximizing the appearance of a casual, friendly visit. He is playing a role, the weary soldier seeking rest, the affectionate kinsman dropping in on his cousin's wife. He arrives at the house of Collatinus as the sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the atrium. The household is unsuspecting. When the porter announces the prince, Lucretia receives him with no hesitation. To the modern eye, this might seem naive, but we must understand the ironclad laws of the ancient world. Lucretia is bound by the sacred code of hospitium. In a world without hotels or police, travel was only possible through a network of private pacts. To refuse a guest, especially a kinsman and a royal prince, was not just rude, it was nefas, a sin against the gods. The guest-host relationship was watched over by Jupiter Hospitalis. By entering her home, Sextus is entering a divine contract. He pledges his good faith to do no harm. She pledges her protection and resources. Lucretia, ever the pious matron, orders the best room prepared. She commands a dinner to be served, a modest but honourable meal, fitting for a time of war. They sit in the atrium. They speak of the siege, of the health of Collatinus, of news from the camp. Imagine the tension masked by this civility. On one side, Lucretia, the embodiment of sexual modesty, performs her duties with an open heart. On the other, Sextus Tarquinius, the wolf in the sheepfold, as Livy describes him, watches her every move. He eats her bread and drinks her wine, all while plotting to destroy the very home that shelters him. In the eyes of history, he is already committing the crime simply by sitting there. He is poisoning the peace of the gods that Lucretia works so hard to maintain. The household retires. The slaves roll up their mats. The lamps are extinguished one by one, plunging the house into the heavy, absolute darkness of the ancient night. The only light comes from the glowing embers of the hearth, where the Lares and Penates, the household gods, watch in mute judgment. Sextus waits, He waits until the house breathes the slow, rhythmic breath of deep sleep. Then he rises. He draws his sword, a xiphus, its leaf-shaped iron blade glinting in the stray moonlight. He moves through the darkened corridors, his feet silent on the tiled floor. He is a prince of Rome, a man who should be guarding the sleep of citizens, now stalking them like an enemy combatant. He reaches the door of Lucretia's chamber. He pushes it open. She is asleep. The moonlight filters through the high windows. He approaches the bed. He places his left hand heavily on her chest, pressing her down into the mattress. With his right hand, he holds the sword to her throat. "Silence, Lucretia," he whispers, his voice a harsh hiss in the dark. "I am Sextus Tarquinius. There is a sword in my hand. You die if you speak a word." Lucretia wakes to the nightmare. Panic, confusion, terror. She sees the glint of the blade, the eyes of the prince. He begins to speak, his voice shifting wildly between solicitation and threat. He confesses his passion. A wicked love, Livy calls it. He begs, he bribes, he threatens. He uses every argument that might move a woman's heart. But Lucretia is made of stern stuff. Even with death pressing against her throat, she refuses him. She is the daughter of Lucretius, the wife of Collatinus. In her worldview, death is a natural end, but dishonor is eternal. She accepts that she will die tonight rather than submit to adultery. Seeing that her will is harder than iron, Sextus plays his final, most terrible card. He realizes that physical fear will not break her. He must target the one thing she values more than her life, her reputation. "If you refuse," he sneers, leaning close, his breath hot on her face, "I will kill you. And when you are dead, I will cut the throat of a male slave and lay his naked body beside yours. I will tell the world, I will tell your husband and your father, that I caught you in the act of adultery with a servant and slew you to avenge the honor of my kinsman." This threat is calculated with demonic precision. We must understand the Roman horror of this specific image. Adultery was a private crime, usually punished by the family patriarchs. But sexual contact with a slave was the ultimate pollution. It was a degradation so vile it stripped a noble woman of her humanity. If Sextus carries out this threat, Lucretia will not die a martyr. She will die a monster. Her husband will not mourn her. He will be relieved she is dead. Her father will strike her name from the family tree. Her ancestors will reject her spirit in the afterlife. She will be erased from history, remembered only as the whore who betrayed her blood for a slave. Faced with this impossible choice, death with total disgrace or life with shame, her resistance breaks. The logic of the matron forces her to yield. She cannot allow her family name to be destroyed. Sextus Tarquinius takes by force what was denied to his rank and his charm. The act is done. In the morning he leaves. He rides away triumphant, believing he has conquered the virtuous woman and proven that all Romans are as corruptible as the Tarquins. He leaves behind a house that has been shattered as surely as if he had put a torch to the roof. He leaves behind a woman who is alive, but in her own eyes, already dead. Lucretia sits in the ruins of her life. The sun has risen on a new day, but the house is shrouded in the silence of mourning. She does not weep yet. There is work to do. She summons a trusted slave and dictates messages, urgent and brief. One to her father, Spurius Lucretius Tricipatinus, the prefect of Rome. One to her husband, Collatinus, at the camp in Ardea. "Come at once," she writes. "A terrible thing has happened." The speed of their arrival testifies to the gravity of the message. They ride hard from the siege lines and the city. Lucretius brings with him Publius Valerius, a man of immense dignity and wisdom who will later be known as Publicola, friend of the people. Collatinus brings his close friend and cousin, Lucius Junius Brutus. We must pause here to consider Brutus. To the Roman world of 509 BC, He is a non-entity. He is the nephew of the king, yes, but he plays the fool. His father and brother were murdered by Tarquin in a purge of potential rivals. To survive, Brutus adopted the mask of stupidity. His cognomen, Brutus, literally means the dullard. He lets men laugh at him. He eats the king's scraps. He keeps his head down and his thoughts hidden. He is a man wearing a mask, waiting for the precise moment when the lightning strike of history requires a conductor. The four men enter Lucretia's chamber. They find her sitting in mourning garb, her hair dishevelled, her eyes red, her face pale as marble. The room smells of stale fear. Collatinus rushes to her. "Is all well?" he asks, though the blackness of her dress tells him it is not. "No," she answers, her voice trembling but clear. "What can be well with a woman who has lost her honour? The traces of another man are in your bed, Collatinus." She tells them everything. She names the offender, Sextus Tarquinius. She recounts the night, the sword, the threat of the slave. The men are horrified. The crime is a double sacrilege, a violation of the marriage bed and a violation of the sacred laws of hospitality. They swear vengeance, but first they try to save her life. They offer her the philosophical consolation that distinguishes Roman law from primitive taboo, the distinction between act and intent. It is the mind that sins, not the body, they tell her. Where purpose was wanting, there is no guilt. This is a crucial historical moment. The men are arguing that she remains a virtuous Roman matron because she did not consent. But Lucretia operates on a starker, older logic. She knows that in the eyes of the public, a woman who survives is often thought to have valued her life more than her chastity. If she lives, she becomes a living ambiguity. If she dies, she becomes an indisputable fact. She shakes her head. "It is for you to determine what is due to him," she says, looking at each of them in turn, placing the burden of justice on their shoulders. "For my own part, though I acquit myself of the sin, I do not absolve myself from punishment. Nor in time to come shall ever unchaste woman live through the example of Lucretia." This is her political legacy. She refuses to let her name be used as a precedent for future women to excuse adultery by claiming they were forced. She draws a knife she has concealed beneath her robe. Before any hand can stop her, she plunges it into her heart. She sinks forward, dying as she falls, her blood spreading across the floor of the room where she once spun wool. The silence is shattered by the conclamatio, the ritual wail of the dead raised by the husband and father. It is a sound of pure, paralyzing grief. But Brutus does not wail. The dullard steps forward. He bends down and pulls the knife from Lucretia's dying chest. He holds it up, the blade dripping with her chaste blood. At this moment, the mask falls away. His face, usually slack and vacant, is transfigured. His eyes burn with a terrifying intensity. He is no longer the fool. He is the tribunus celerum, the commander of the knights, the highest military official present. He looks at the grieving men, and he speaks, his voice ringing with the authority of a general giving orders. "Per hunc castissimum ante regiam inuriam sanguinem juro." By this blood, he swears, most pure before the outrage of the prince, I swear before you, O gods, and I make you my witnesses. I will pursue Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, his wicked wife, and all his children, with sword, with fire, and by whatever violence I can. And I will suffer neither them nor any other to be king in Rome. The consequences of this oath are seismic. Brutus has just performed a sacratio, a ritual curse. By swearing to the gods, he has made the Tarquins accursed. They are no longer the king and his family. They are outlaws, stripped of divine protection. Anyone can kill them without sin. He hands the knife to Collatinus, then to Lucretius, then to Valerius. They are stunned. The grief in the room hardens into something colder, something stronger. They realize that Brutus is not just calling for revenge, he is calling for revolution. They take the knife, they swear the oath, The private tragedy of the house of Collatinus is over. The public war for the soul of Rome has begun. They do not hide the body. To do so would be to treat the suicide as a shame. Brutus intends to treat it as a weapon. He orders Lucretia's corpse to be carried out of the house, blood-stained and tragic, and placed on a bier. They carry her first to the Forum of Calatia. The people gather, drawn by the wailing of the women and the rumour of death in the high house. When they see the wounds, when they hear the story of the king's son and his violence, a cry of outrage sweeps through the town. The youth of Calatia arm themselves. They are ready to march. "To Rome," Brutus commands. He leaves a garrison to hold the gates of Calatia, ensuring no messengers can slip out to warn the king at Ardea. The rest, an armed mob led by the 4 conspirators, march on the city. They arrive in Rome, their numbers swelling as they go. The sight of an armed multitude entering the city causes panic at first, but when the people see Brutus, Valerius, and Lucretius at the head, men of the highest nobility, the fear turns to curiosity, then to anger, as the news of the atrocity spreads like wildfire through the narrow streets. They make for the Forum Romanum. We must visualize the Forum of 509 BC. It is not the marble-clad showpiece of the later empire. It is a low-lying, marshy valley that has only recently been paved and drained by the Tarquin's great sewer, the Cloaca Maxima. It is a place of clay brick, tufa and wood. The Comitium, the sacred meeting place of the assembly, lies at the northern end, a rectangular space oriented by the augurs, facing the Curia Hostilia, the Senate house. Brutus ascends the tribunal. Here he plays his masterstroke. He does not speak merely as an angry uncle. He invokes his official rank, Tribunus Celerum, Tribune of the Knights. This is the second highest office in the kingdom, the commander of the king's personal cavalry. Crucially, it gives him the legal power to summon the assembly of the people when the king is absent. The criers sound their horns. The citizens of Rome, the populace, pour into the forum. They see the body of Lucretia on the high bier. They see her father weeping. They see Brutus, the dullard, standing tall with the bloody knife still in his hand. He speaks. It is one of the pivotal speeches of antiquity. Brutus knows that the crime against of Lucretia, while terrible, is not enough to overturn a government on its own. He must connect this specific crime to the general suffering of the people. He must prove that the violation was not an aberration, but the inevitable result of tyranny. He begins by indicting the king, Tarquinius Superbus. He reminds them of the king's rise to power, the murder of the beloved king, Servius Tullius. He reminds them of the desecration of Servius's body, run over by the chariot of Tarquin's wicked wife, Tullia, a crime against the family and the gods. Then he turns to the grievances of the poor standing before him. He points to the Cloaca Maxima. "You, the conquerors of nearby nations," Brutus roars. "You, the warriors of Rome, what has the king made of you? He has turned you into stonecutters and ditch diggers. He has treated free Roman citizens like bought slaves, forcing you to rot in the darkness of his sewers, to build monuments to his own vanity." This strikes the nerve. The Romans were deeply proud of their status as soldier citizens. To be used for manual labour was a profound humiliation. Brutus links their physical degradation to Lucretia's sexual degradation. Both the people and the matron have been violated by the arrogance of the Tarquins. "And now," Brutus cries, gesturing to the bier, "look at this. This is the hospitality of the Tarquins. This is how they reward the loyalty of their noblest subjects." The crowd weeps. Men tear their tunics in grief. They cry out for vengeance, but Brutus does not want a riot. He wants a law. "Will you suffer this?" he demands. "Will you remain slaves, or will you be Romans? I tell you, the gods are with us. The time for patience is over. The time for the sword is here." He proposes a formal decree to the assembly. The proposal is radical but legally precise. Abrogation of imperium. The Tarquins are to be stripped of all power. Exile. They are to be banished. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, his wicked wife, and all his children, forever. Anathema. The title of Rex, king, is to be accursed. No man shall ever bear it again. But Brutus is careful. The king was also the high priest. If they remove the king, who will perform the rites? Will the gods punish Rome? To satisfy the religious fears of the people, Brutus proposes the creation of a rex sacrorum, king of rites, a priest who will hold the title of king solely for religious ceremonies, but who is barred from holding any political or military office. The gods are appeased. The political threat is neutralized. The vote is taken. It is not the orderly pebble-casting vote of a calm election. It is a shout, a universal roar of aye that shakes the temples on the Capitol. The curse is laid. The gates of Rome are slammed shut against the king. Meanwhile, news reaches the camp at Ardea. The king, hearing of the revolt, rides frantically for Rome with his personal guard. He arrives at the gates to find them barred and the walls manned by the very citizens he once oppressed. He is turned away, a king without a city. Simultaneously, Brutus has executed a brilliant military flank. He does not wait in Rome. He rides to Ardea to win over the army. He arrives at the camp and tells the soldiers the story of Lucretia and the vote of the assembly. The soldiers, tired of the siege and the king's arrogance, cheer Brutus. They expel the king's sons from the camp. Tarquin flees north to Caere in Etruria, an exile in the land of his ancestors. Sextus Tarquinius, the architect of the disaster, flees to Gabii, a town he had previously tricked and conquered. There he is soon assassinated by old enemies who have not forgotten his past treacheries. The monarchy has fallen, but the hardest work remains. It is easy to kill a king. It is much harder to build a republic. Rome is free, but freedom is fragile. A city cannot be ruled by a mob, and an army cannot be commanded by a committee. The king is gone, but the imperium, the religious and military power to command, remains. It is a dangerous energy that must be contained, or it will destroy the city. Lucius Junius Brutus, the student of law and history, knows that a new structure must replace the old. He does not propose a democracy of the Greek sort, nor a return to tribal chaos. He proposes a res publica, a public affair. His innovation is simple but brilliant. He retains the absolute power of the king, but he subjects it to two ironclad constraints, time and number. Annuality. Instead of ruling for life, the leaders will rule for only 1 year. Collegiality. Instead of one leader, there will be two. They will possess equal power, meaning they can check and veto one another. He calls these new magistrates consuls, though in the earliest records they were likely called praetors, meaning leaders. The elections are held in the Campus Martius, the Field of Mars. This location is legally mandatory. Why? Because the assembly of the people in their voting capacity is technically an army, the Comitia Centuriata. It is a gathering of men under arms, and by sacred religious law, no army may muster inside the Pomerium, the sacred boundary of the city. To vote, the Romans must leave their city and stand in the open fields. The atmosphere of this first election is solemn, charged with the gravity of the unknown. The sun beats down on the grassy plain by the Tiber. The citizens stand in their centuries. Blocks of men organized not by tribe, but by their wealth and their ability to provide armor for the state. The voting is a physical, audible act. In these early days, before the secret ballot laws of the later republic, the vote is public. The citizens walk across a raised bridge and declare their choice to a teller. The heralds call the centuries. The century of knights, how do you vote? The answer comes back, rolling across the field like thunder. Lucius Junius Brutus, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. The names echo down the lines. The first-class votes, The second class, the voting stops as soon as a majority is reached. The lower classes often do not even get to speak, a feature of the Roman system that explicitly favours the wealthy. But today the consensus is universal. The first two consuls of Rome are the avenger of Lucretia and the husband of Lucretia. They assume the office immediately. They don the toga praetexta, the white toga bordered with purple, symbolising their sacred status. They sit on the sella curulis, the ivory folding chair that symbolises their jurisdiction, a seat that travels, a seat of judgment. But Brutus adds a crucial detail to the symbolism of power, one that defines the concept of libertas. He looks at the lictors, the 12 bodyguards who walk before the consuls. They carry the fasces, bundles of elm rods bound with red leather thongs. These rods represent the power to scourge and beat. Under the kings, an axe head was always bound inside the bundle, its blade visible, symbolising the power of life and death. Brutus issues his first command: remove the axes. He orders that within the city walls, the axe must be taken out of the fasces. This is not just aesthetic, it is a legal revolution. It signifies that inside Rome, the consul cannot summarily execute a citizen. He can flog, but he cannot kill. If a citizen is condemned to death, he now has the right of provocatio, the right to appeal the sentence to the people. The axe remains in the bundle only when the consul is outside the city, commanding the army in war. Inside the home, the people are sovereign. To seal this new compact, Brutus makes the people swear the oath again, this time as a collective body. We swear that we will suffer no man to be king in Rome. It becomes the foundational dogma of the state, the political religion of the Republic. However, the euphoria of the election soon hits a wall of cold reality. The new Republic has a problem, and his name is Collatinus. Lucius Tarquinius. Collatinus is a hero. He is the husband of the martyr. He was one of the 4 liberators, but he bears the hated name, Tarquinius. The people begin to murmur. The Tarquins are still among us, they whisper in the marketplaces. One Tarquin is king in exile, the other is consul in Rome. To the superstitious Roman mind, the name itself is a pollution. As long as a Tarquin holds power, the revolution feels incomplete. Brutus, ever the hard pragmatist, takes a painful step. He places the stability of the state above personal friendship. He convenes an assembly and publicly addresses his co-consul. "Do you wish to remove this fear from the people's minds?" Brutus asks him, his voice echoing in the silence. "We know you are innocent. We know you are loyal, but your name is an enemy to liberty. Absolve us of this terror. Take your wealth, take your household, and leave. Rome will pay you for your property, but the Tarquins must go." It is a moment of supreme harshness. Collatinus is stunned. He pleads his innocence, but he looks at the faces of the crowd and sees the fear. He realizes that Brutus is right. The Republic cannot survive if it is haunted by the ghosts of the monarchy. Heartbroken but patriotic, Collatinus agrees. He abdicates the consulship. He packs his belongings and goes into voluntary exile to the town of Lavinium. The last Tarquin has left Rome. In his place, the people elect Publius Valerius, the man who helped storm the gates. The government is finally secure, but in the shadows of the city, the enemies of the new order are already meeting. The Republic has survived its birth, but it has not yet survived its family. The king is gone, but the rot lingers in the cracks. Not everyone in Rome hates the Tarquins. There is a generation of young aristocrats who grew up alongside the princes. These are the gilded youth we met in the camp at Ardea. They miss the license of the court. They miss the freedom to abuse their inferiors without consequence. They miss the luxury, the parties, and the lack of accountability. Under the strict, austere rule of Brutus and the new Republic, they feel stifled. They gather in secret, whispering their grievances in the back rooms of wine shops. Their complaint is specific and chillingly logical. A king is a man, they argue. You can ask a man for a favour, he can be angry, and then he can forgive. He has a human heart that can be swayed by friendship or bribery. But the law is deaf. The law is inexorable. It has no ears for excuses. It is a dangerous thing for a man to live by his innocence alone. This is the crux of the historical conflict. These young nobles do not want equality. They want privilege. They realise that in a republic, their family names cannot save them from a magistrate's judgment. Among these dissatisfied youths are the Vitelli and the Aquilii, noble families connected by blood to the exiled king. And most terribly, among them are Titus and Tiberius Junius, the sons of Brutus. The irony is tragic. The father is the architect of liberty. The sons are the agents of tyranny. It is a generational divide that will end in blood. The opportunity for treason arrives with ambassadors from the exiled Tarquin. They come to Rome ostensibly to negotiate the return of the king's personal property, his gold, his tapestries, his grain. This is a diplomatic ruse. While the Senate debates the property rights of the exile, the ambassadors are secretly recruiting. They find the Vitelli, the Aquilii, and the sons of Brutus receptive. A conspiracy is hatched. They plan to kill the consuls and open the gates of Rome to Tarquin's army in the dead of night. To bind themselves to this treason, they decide to swear an oath. But a simple promise is not enough for such a dark deed. They need a ritual that binds their souls, something that crosses a line from which there is no return. They meet in the house of the Aquilii. It is a dark, secluded place. They order the slaves out, or so they think. According to the historians Plutarch and Dionysius, they perform a rite of nephus, an unspeakable abomination. They sacrifice a man. We should note that while animal sacrifice was central to Roman religion, human sacrifice was viewed as barbaric and strictly forbidden. By doing this, the conspirators are not just breaking the law, they are unmaking their own Romanness. They kill the victim, and then in a parody of the sacred libations, they drink his blood and touch his entrails, swearing on this polluted sacrament to kill the consuls, swearing to kill Brutus. But the gods of Rome are watching. A slave named Vindicius, sensing something amiss, has not left the house. He has hidden himself in the room, crouching behind a heavy chest, trembling in the shadows. He sees the knife, he sees the blood, he hears the names. He hears Titus and Tiberius Junius promising to murder their own father. Terrified, Vindicius waits until the conspirators seal their letters to Tarquin, the physical proof of their treason, and leave the house. He is paralyzed by a dilemma. He dares not go to the consuls. Brutus is the father of the traitors, and the other consul is a friend of the Aquilii. In his mind, the intricate web of aristocratic kinship makes justice impossible. Who would believe a slave against the sons of the liberator? Finally, he goes to Publius Valerius. Valerius is known for his approachability and his justice. Vindicius reveals the plot. Valerius acts instantly. He does not summon the lictors, he gathers his clients. In the Roman social structure, these are men bound to a patron by mutual obligation. They are his private army. Valerius and his clients storm the house of the Aquilii. They seize the letters written by the conspirators. They catch the ambassadors before they can leave. The plot is blown wide open. The young men are arrested. The sons of Brutus are dragged from their beds in chains. The city wakes up to the horror that the Republic has been betrayed from within. The sun rises on the Comitium. The air is cold and still. The consuls, Brutus and Valerius, take their seats on the tribunal. The ivory cella curulis is set up on the high platform. The lictors stand ready, their fasces held high, though, as per the new law, the axes are removed. The prisoners are brought in. They are led into the open space before the tribunal. The crowd is silent, horrified. Everyone knows who these young men are. They are the flower of Roman nobility, and standing at the front, heads bowed, are Titus and Tiberius Junius. Vindicius, the slave, is brought forward. He gives his testimony, his voice shaking. The letters are produced, the letters signed by the son's own hands, promising to kill their father and open the gates. The seal of the Junii is broken. The text is read aloud. There is no defence. The guilt is absolute. All eyes turn to Brutus. The crowd expects mercy, or if not mercy, then at least a mitigation. Perhaps exile? Surely a father cannot condemn his own flesh and blood to death. The people watch his face, looking for the father, the man who wept for Lucretia. They remember the dullard who hid his mind to survive. Surely he can find a way to save his sons. But Brutus sits like a statue, carved from basalt. We must understand the dual power he holds in this moment. First, he is the consul, the supreme magistrate of the state. Second, he is the pater familias. In Roman law, the father holds patria potestas, the absolute power of life and death over his children. He owns them as he owns his property. He could legally take them home and punish them privately. He could exile them. He could forgive them. If he acts as a father, he saves his sons, but he destroys the republic. He proves that the leaders are above the law. If he acts as a consul, he kills his sons, but he saves the state. He looks at his sons. Titus, he says, his voice flat and calm. Tiberius, have you no defence against these charges? They are silent. They weep. They look at the ground. Brutus asks them a second time. Then a third. Silence. Brutus turns to the lictors. His face is a mask of terrible resolve. He utters the formulaic words of the supreme penalty, the words that will echo through the centuries as the definition of Roman duty. Lictores expedite virgas et secures. Lictors prepare the rods and the axes. A gasp goes through the forum. The senators, the people, even Valerius, are shocked. Exile, they whisper. Let them be banished. The axes were removed from the fasces to protect the citizens. But Brutus is declaring that by their treason his sons are no longer citizens. They're enemies of the state. Brutus ignores the crowd. The law is deaf. If the consul makes an exception for his sons, the law is dead, and the king might as well return. The lictors step forward. They strip the shirts from the young men. They bind their hands behind their backs. They tie them to the whipping posts. Then the flogging begins. The sound of the elm rod striking flesh fills the silence of the forum. The boys scream. They call out to their father. Brutus does not look away. The historian Livy writes that men looked on the father's face as much as upon the son's punishment. He watches every blow. His face twitches, the muscles of his jaw working, the agony of the father warring with the duty of the magistrate. But he does not intervene. He is tearing his own heart out to feed the republic. When the flogging is done, the young men hang limp against the posts, their backs a ruin of blood. The lictors stop and look to the consul for the final signal. Brutus nods. The lictors lay the youths on the ground. They raise the axes. The blade falls. The heads of Titus and Tiberius Junius are severed. The blood of the conspirators pools on the stones of the comitium, mingling with the dust. It is a different blood than the chaste blood of Lucretia, but it is just as foundational. Lucretia's blood created the desire for liberty. The blood of Brutus's sons secured the discipline to maintain it. Brutus stands up. He does not stay to watch the execution of the others. The Aquilii and Vitelli are left to Valerius to judge. Brutus descends from the tribunal. He walks through the parting crowd, his toga gathered around him, alone in a solitude that no one dares to breach. He has killed his future to save Rome's future. The aftermath is swift. The slave Vindicius is given his freedom, the first slave to be manumitted by the touch of the vindicta rod. His name becomes the etymology of the legal term Vindication. The property of the Tarquins is seized. Their land, the Campus Martius, is consecrated to Mars. Their grain, standing ready for harvest, is deemed accursed. It is cut and thrown into the Tiber. The sheer volume of grain catches on the shoals in the low water. Over time, silt collects around it, forming the foundation of the Tiber island. The Republic is sealed. It has been bought with the virtue of a woman and the iron will of a father. The kings are gone, and in the silence of the Forum, beneath the shadow of the Capitol, the Roman people know that they have entered a new world. A world of harsh laws, of terrible duties, and of a freedom that is heavier than chains. The ink is barely dry on the new laws when the war horns sound from the north. Tarquin has not gone quietly into the night. He has gone to Veii, Rome's ancient rival just across the Tiber. He has stripped off his Roman toga and donned the armour of an Etruscan warlord. He stands before the Council of Veii, weeping, warning them that if kings are expelled from Rome, no crown in Etruria is safe. The Veientes listen. They have hated Rome for centuries. They see a chance to cripple their rising neighbour. They muster an army. They march on Rome. The Roman army marches out to meet them. They meet at the Erusian forest. It is a chaotic, messy engagement. The Roman legions are still learning to fight without a king. Brutus commands the cavalry. As he rides at the head of the column, he spots a figure in the enemy lines. It is Aruns Tarquinius, the king's son, the brother of the violator Sextus, and Brutus's own cousin. The history books tell us that what happens next is a moment of pure tribal fury. In a disciplined hoplite battle, the general stays back. But Brutus and Aruns are consumed by a personal hatred that transcends tactics. Aruns sees Brutus, the man who stole his father's throne, the man wearing the consul's insignia. He shouts, "There is the man who drove us from our country. Look how proudly he rides with the king's badges." He spurs his horse. Brutus does not retreat. He spurs his own. They charge each other like jousting knights, but with no intent to survive. Neither man raises his shield. Each man focuses entirely on the offence. The collision is horrific. The spear of Aruns pierces Brutus's chest. The spear of Brutus pierces Aruns' gut. Both men fall from their horses, dead before they hit the ground. The battle rages on until sunset, a bloody stalemate. But in the night, a legend says a voice, perhaps the god Silvanus, roars from the forest. One more man has fallen on the Tuscan side. The Romans have won. The Etruscans, superstitious and terrified, flee in the night. The Romans return to the city victorious, but they bring back a corpse instead of a consul. The funeral of Brutus is a massive state event, but the most significant tribute comes not from the soldiers, but from the women. The matrons of Rome, honouring the man who avenged Lucretia, mourn him for an entire year, as if he were their own father. But once the tears dry, a cold paranoia settles over the city. Publius Valerius is now the sole consul. The empty chair of Brutus sits beside him, and Valerius makes a mistake. He begins to build a grand stone house on the top of the Velian hill, a steep rise overlooking the Forum. The people watch the construction with narrowing eyes. "Why is he building a fortress on the high ground?" they whisper. "Why hasn't he called an election to replace Brutus? He wants to be king. He removed the Tarquins only to take their place." The rumour becomes a roar. Valerius, a man of integrity, is shocked when he hears it. He realises that in this new world, perception is reality. It is not enough to be innocent. One must appear innocent. He stops construction immediately. In a dramatic piece of political theatre, he orders his workmen to tear the house down, stone by stone, until it is level with the ground. He moves his residence to the very bottom of the hill, symbolically placing himself beneath the people. Then he summons the assembly. He enters not with his lictors holding the fasces high, but with the bundles lowered, a gesture of submission. "I have heard your fears," he tells the crowd, "and I would rather die than be feared by my fellow citizens." He proposes a new set of laws, the leges Valeria, which form the bedrock of Roman civil rights, the right of appeal. No magistrate can scourge or execute a Roman citizen without the right of appeal to the people. The curse on tyranny. Any man who attempts to seize a distinct office without the people's vote may be killed by any citizen with impunity. This law effectively legalizes the assassination of aspiring dictators. The people are won over. They elect a new colleague for him, Spurius Lucretius, Lucretius' father, though he soon dies of old age and is replaced by Marcus Horatius Pulvillus. Valerius gains a new name, Publicola, the one who cultivates the people. The internal crisis is solved, the constitution is strengthened, but the external threat has only metastasized. Tarquin has realized that Veii is not strong enough to retake Rome. He needs a superpower. He travels north to the court of the most powerful warlord in Italy, Lars Porsena, the king of Clusium, and Porsena is listening. The sentries on the Janiculum hill see it first, a massive cloud of dust rising in the north, stretching across the horizon. Then the glint of bronze in the morning sun. It is the army of Lars Porsena. The panic in Rome is immediate and total. The farmers in the countryside abandon their fields, driving their cattle through the gates, clogging the streets in a terrified stampede. The Senate meets in emergency session, but the reports are grim. The Etruscans have stormed the Janiculum, the fortified hill on the western bank of the Tiber. Between the conquering army and the vulnerable city stands only one barrier, the river Tiber, and spanning that river is only one crossing, the Pons Sublicius. This bridge is sacred. Built by the priest-king Ancus Marcius, it is constructed entirely of wood, held together by wooden dowels without a single iron nail. This is a religious requirement. Iron is prohibited so that the bridge can be easily dismantled in times of crisis, a deliberate weakness engineered for exactly this moment. The maintenance of this bridge is so vital that the high priests of Rome are named for it, the pontifices or bridge builders. But now the weakness is a liability. The Etruscans are rushing down the Janiculum slopes, heading straight for the bridge. If they cross, the city falls. The Roman troops guarding the western bank break and run. It is a rout. Officers shout orders that dissolve in the wind. But one man does not run. Publius Horatius Cocles. His cognomen, Cocles, means one-eyed, likely from a past battle wound. He is stationed at the bridgehead. He sees the disaster unfolding. He realizes that if the enemy crosses the bridge, the walls of the Palatine will not save them. He grabs the fleeing soldiers by their cloaks. "By gods and men," he roars, "if you leave this bridge, there will be more enemies in the Palatine than on the Janiculum. Destroy it, burn it, hack it down. I will hold them off." Shamed by his courage, two senior officers stand with him, Spurius Lartius and Titus Herminius. These three men stand shoulder to shoulder at the narrow entrance of the bridge, a human shield against an army. The Etruscans laugh. They see three men standing against thousands. Their vanguard charges. But the narrowness of the bridge works for the Romans. The Etruscans cannot bring their numbers to bear. They must fight 3 against 3. And Horatius is a demon. He fights with the desperate fury of a man defending his home. The pile of Etruscan dead begins to rise, forming a rampart of flesh. Behind them, the Roman soldiers are hacking frantically at the bridge supports. Axes bite into the ancient timber. Fire is applied to the dry wood. The bridge begins to groan and sag. Sensing the structure giving way, Horatius orders his 2 companions to retreat. "Save yourselves," he commands. Lartius and Herminius scramble back across the splintering beams to safety. Horatius stands alone. He casts his one eye over the Etruscan nobles. He mocks them. "Slaves of a haughty king," he shouts, You who have lost your own freedom come to take ours." Enraged, the Etruscans throw a volley of spears. Horatius catches them on his shield, bracing himself against the impact. He stands like a statue, immovable. Then a crack like thunder. The pons sublicius shatters. With a crash, the wooden span collapses into the rushing Tiber, leaving a gaping void between the fury of Porsena and the heart of Rome. Horatius is cut off. He is bleeding, exhausted, and trapped on the enemy bank. The Etruscans rush forward to kill him. He turns to the river. He does not ask for a miracle. He speaks to the god of the river as a son speaks to a father. "Tiberine Pater," he prays, "I pray thee, receive these arms, and this thy soldier in thy propitious stream." He leaps, fully armoured, into the swirling waters. The history books diverge here. Polybius, the pragmatic Greek historian, says he drowned, a tragic sacrifice for the state. But Livy, the Roman romantic, says he swam. Weighed down by bronze, bleeding into the water, fighting the current, he strokes toward the Roman bank. The city watches in breathless silence. When he pulls himself onto the mud of the eastern bank, a roar goes up that dwarfs the sound of the battle. He has saved Rome. In gratitude, the starving citizens of Rome each donate a portion of their meagre food rations to him, a gesture of immense value during a siege. A statue of him is erected in the Comitium. He is crippled for life by his wounds, never to serve in the army or hold the consulship, but his limp becomes a badge of honour more prestigious than any crown. The bridge is down, Rome is safe from immediate storming, but Porsena is not discouraged. He settles in. He surrounds the city. If he cannot take Rome by steel, he will take it by hunger. The mood inside the walls of Rome is black. The euphoria of the bridge defence has faded, replaced by the gnawing ache of empty bellies. The grain stores are dwindling. The Senate sits in the Curia, debating terms of surrender. But one young man, Gaius Mucius, refuses to accept the slow death of the siege. He is a noble youth, fierce and proud. He believes that waiting for death is the act of a slave. A free man goes to meet it. He goes to the Senate. Even in his zeal, he adheres to Roman discipline. He does not go rogue, he seeks permission. "Fathers," he tells the senators, "I wish to cross the river, not to plunder, but to do a great deed if the gods assist me." The senators, seeing the fire in his eyes and having no other options, grant him permission. He conceals a dagger beneath his tunic and slips out of the city gate in the dead of night, swimming across the Tiber to the Etruscan camp. The camp of Lars Porsena is a sprawling city of canvas and silk. It is confident, loud and loosely guarded. Why guard closely when the enemy is starving behind walls? Mucius blends into the crowd of soldiers. He speaks Etruscan, a common skill for the Roman elite, who are culturally educated by their neighbours. He makes his way to the king's tribunal. It is payday for the Etruscan army. The king, Lars Porsena, is seated on a high platform. Beside him sits his secretary, a man dressed in equally magnificent robes, busy distributing coins and checking rolls. Here Mucius makes a fatal error born of cultural ignorance. In Rome, no one sits beside a magistrate. The consul sits alone. But in the Etruscan court, the bureaucracy is powerful. Mucius sees two men in purple. He does not know which is the king. He fears that if he asks, he will be discovered. He gambles. He draws his dagger. He pushes through the crowd and strikes. The blade buries itself in the chest of the man in the chair. The man falls, blood spraying the platform. But it is not the king. It is the secretary. Mucius is instantly seized by the king's bodyguards. They drag him, struggling and bloody, before the real Lars Porsena. The king is terrified. He has just seen death miss him by inches. He is enraged. "Who are you?" Porsena screams. "Who sent you?" Mucius stands amidst the guards. He does not beg. He looks the king in the eye and speaks with the terrifying arrogance of a martyr. "I am a Roman citizen," he declares. "My name is Gaius Mucius. I am an enemy who wished to kill an enemy, and I have no less courage to suffer death than I had to inflict it. To do and to suffer brave things is Roman, et faceriet parti fortia Romanum est." Porsena orders the fires to be stoked. He threatens Mucius with being burned alive if he does not reveal the details of the plot. "You speak of courage," the king sneers, "but fire will make you talk." Mucius looks at the brazier, a pan of red-hot coals intended for a religious sacrifice. "Watch," Mucius says, "and see how cheap the body is to men who have their eyes on great glory." He steps forward. He thrusts his right hand, the hand that failed to kill the king, directly into the fire. The flesh sizzles. The smell of burning skin fills the tent. The guards recoil in horror. But Mucius does not scream. He does not even flinch. He stands there, his face set in a mask of grim determination, watching his own hand burn as if it belonged to a stranger. He is destroying the hand that failed the Republic. Lars Porsena is stunned. He leaps from his throne. This is unnatural. A man who can destroy his own body to make a point is a man who cannot be conquered by fear. Porsena orders the guards to pull Mucius away from the fire. "Go," the king says, shaken. "You have been a worse enemy to yourself than to me. I would praise your courage if it stood on the side of my country. I release you, untouched and unharmed by the laws of war." Mucius, now maimed, decides to grant the king a gift in return for his life, but it is a gift of psychological poison. "Since you respect courage," Mucius lies, or perhaps exaggerates, "I will tell you what you could not force from me. 300 noble youths of Rome have sworn just as I did to kill you. I was merely the first, the lot fell to me, but others will come one by one until fortune gives one of them the chance to strike home. You may defeat armies, king, but you will never sleep soundly again." This is the bluff that wins the war. Porsena looks at the charred stump of Mucius's hand. He imagines 300 more men like this, fanatics who feel no pain, who cannot be bribed, who cannot be tortured. Mucius is escorted back to Rome. He is given the cognomen Scaevola, the left-handed, a badge of honour that his family will wear for centuries. But in the Etruscan camp, the will to fight has broken. Porsena is a rational king. He wants power, not a death sentence. He realises that conquering Rome is like trying to swallow a bag of broken glass. He sends envoys to the Senate. He offers peace. He will withdraw his support for the Tarquins. He will lift the siege, but he demands hostages. He wants the children of the Roman nobility as insurance that Rome will keep the peace. The Senate, desperate for food, agrees. They send a group of young boys and girls to the Etruscan camp across the river. The war seems over, but the spirit of resistance has not just infected the men of Rome, it has spread to the women. The siege is technically over, but the humiliation is not. Across the Tiber, in the sprawling luxury of the Etruscan camp, 20 Roman youths sit in a gilded cage. They are treated well, fed the king's food, dressed in fine clothes, but they are captives. They are the living guarantee that Rome will behave. Among the hostages is Cloelia. She is a teenage girl, a virgin of noble birth, but she has watched the war. She knows the story of Horatius at the bridge. She knows of Mucius burning his hand. She decides that she will not be a passive pawn in a diplomatic game. The Etruscan camp is relaxed. Porsena believes the war is won. The guards are accustomed to the docility of captives. Cloelia watches them. She learns their schedules. She notes the point on the riverbank where the current is weakest. One evening, she asks the guards for privacy so that she and the other girls may bathe in the river, a request granting the modesty due to noble women. The guards, unsuspecting, withdraw a short distance. Cloelia seizes the moment. "Now," she hisses. She plunges into the Tiber. The other girls, terrified but inspired by her ferocity, follow her lead. The water is cold and swift. They are not wearing armor like Horatius, but they are swimming against the drag of their heavy woolen tunics. The Etruscan sentries spot them. Shouts ring out. Spears splash into the water around them. Hissed warnings from the archers on the bank. But Cloelia leads them on. She fights the current, herding the younger girls like a shepherd, urging them toward the Roman bank. They crawl onto the mud, gasping, wet and alive. They scramble up the bank and run to the city gates. Rome rejoices. The parents embrace their returned daughters. It is a triumph of daring. But the celebration is cut short. A herald arrives from Lars Porsena. The king is furious. He demands the return of the hostage, Cloelia. If she is not returned, he considers the treaty broken, and he will raze Rome to the ground. Now the Senate faces a terrible test of good faith. They look at the brave girl who risked everything for freedom. They look at the Etruscan army, threatening their starvation. The consuls make the hard Roman choice. They cannot break a sworn oath, even to an enemy. The law is above sentiment. You must go back, they tell Cloelia. Cloelia does not weep. She understands the duty. She agrees to return voluntarily to the Etruscan camp, surrendering her freedom to save the city's honour. She is rowed back across the river. She walks into the king's tent, alone, expecting death. But Lars Porsena is not the man he was when he arrived. He has seen Horatius hold a bridge. He has seen Mucius burn his hand. And now he sees a teenage girl who treats the Tiber as a swimming pool and honours treaties better than kings. He is a warrior, and he recognises game. He looks at her with genuine awe. You are greater than them all, Porsena declares. Mucius merely threatened my life. You threatened my control. I will not keep you. He grants her freedom, but he goes further. In a gesture of supreme chivalry, he tells her she may choose half of the remaining hostages to take home with her. Cloelia looks at the captive Romans. She sees the young men and the young women. She chooses the youngest boys, the ones most vulnerable to abuse in a foreign camp. She leads them out. Porsena packs up his army. He realizes he cannot conquer a people where even the schoolgirls have hearts of steel. He abandons the Tarquins. He marches home to Clusium. The war is over. To honour Cloelia, the Romans do something unprecedented. On the Via Sacra, the holiest street in the city, they erect a statue. It is not a statue of a woman spinning wool or weeping. It is an equestrian statue, a woman sitting on a horse. It stands for centuries, a bronze testament to the fact that the Republic was built by men and women alike. The Tarquins are gone. The Etruscans are gone. The hunger is gone. Rome stands alone on the banks of the Tiber. It is poor, it is battered, and it is surrounded by enemies. But it is free. And in the fires of this terrible year, the iron character of the Roman people has been forged. They have learned that kings are mortal, but the Republic, if defended with virtue, can live forever. And so the sun sets on the year 509 BC. Rome survived the kings, the siege, and the hunger. It stands battered but free, having learned the hardest lesson of all, that liberty is not a gift, but a debt paid in blood. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the twilight of the kings and the dawn of the Republic, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It truly helps us bring these ancient stories back to life. I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. When Brutus executed his own sons to save the state, was he a hero of justice or a monster of ambition? Where do you draw the line between duty and family? Let me know what you think. Until next time.